That's how the story ended. The Lantern King vanished without a trace, and we never heard from him again. Nyrissa helped return the kingdom to Golarion and followed her beloved there. After celebrating the victory with great fanfare, everyone began work on restoration efforts. Nyrissa helped the king in every way possible, and she quickly came to be loved across the country. No one would have thought that this kind nymph was a former villain, so recently guilty of causing all those afflictions. The kingdom built by our hero became an example for all its neighbors. What else would you expect? The Stolen Lands became the only place where the citizens sincerely toast the health of their ruler. The citizens lived trouble-free, and taxes made it to the treasury without losses. A powerful army guards the peace. Exploration of magic is on par. The temples are flooded with their congregations. And, most importantly, our cultural contributions are at least the equal of Absalom. Just half a year after the war with the First World, Galt moved its troops to the southern border of the kingdom. Their attack was rebuffed. The enemy state's infantry retreated when the army's wizards brought down rains of fire and magical arrows on the heads of the flabbergasted enemy soldiers. Since then, Galt hasn't risked crossing any borders again, fearing cruel retaliation for further insolence. The king's subjects praise his generosity, while citizens of neighboring lands groan from crippling taxes. Citizens of the Stolen Lands have it pretty good. Truth be told, the treasury isn't always capable of paying the royal bills, and the throne room's adornments are clearly decaying. But sometimes you have to buy the people's love, literally. How do you turn the Stolen Lands, savage and unruly, into a stronghold of safety and stability? The king found an answer. By creating a police state. There are always some who are unhappy with the excessive interference advisors have in the citizens' lives, of course, but their protests are easily overlooked. No kingdom can function without its nobility, and the kingdom in the Stolen Lands is no exception. Landowners, ready to share the burden of ruling alongside the king, grew to be more and more influential over time. And the more pompous the court balls and receptions held by dukes and baronets became, the more eventful were the lives of the schemers and freeloaders who always live within the shadows of the powerful. Using necromancy in service to the state is a solution as bold as it is desperate. Pharasma's church still makes frequent, and frankly reasonable, plans to send a massive crusade against the Stolen Lands to cleanse the nest of vice. The kingdom's citizens, however, not only yielded to the use of an undead workforce, they actually supported it. After all, someone has to do the most dangerous, most unpleasant work. The feud between Brevois North and South, which had been smoldering for ages, finally sparked the fires of civil war. Our troops lent aid to the forces of Restov, led by Swordlord Jamandi Aldori. After several bloody battles, House Sertova was forced to recognize Restov's independence. The victory came at a high price, but we have no more loyal ally than once more free Rostland. Casil Eldori, who lost an arm during the war, became a permanent ambassador of Rostland at our court. The Tiger Lords found it difficult to recuperate after what Armagh did to them. The barbarians remaining in Numeria weren't very happy that we sheltered the deposed chief and his supporters, but they were too afraid of him to attack us over it. That bomb has a long fuse, but it's definitely burning. I'm afraid that a few generations down the road, the grandchildren of the current Tiger Lords may want to retaliate against us for their grandfathers. Pitax almost returned to its former state. A joyful city filled with beers of dubious quality and deals of questionable legality. The old trade houses lost the crown, but they retrieved the property Iravetti had taken from them. Soon, Pitax became almost like a second capital in the kingdom, a thriving city through which rivers of money from across the region ran. Unfortunately, we get much less of this money than we would like. Governor Liachenza turned out to be helpless against widespread embezzlement. Maestro Bellavara gave the Academy of the Arts a second wind. Throwing out mediocre students and sycophants, she gathered within its walls talented visionaries, rebels, and freethinkers, those whose gifts felt cramped within the walls of more respectable institutions. She managed to do what Iravetti never could, namely make the Academy truly famous, albeit scandalously so. And so what if, instead of odes to the king, the Academy releases sneering pamphlets and revolutionary leaflets? It only helps his reputation as a true patron of the arts. Trolls and kobolds, two of the most savage native peoples living in the Gnarl Marches, were completely exterminated in the region. The forest paths became much safer, and the peasants' cattle have stopped going missing. Bartholomew Delgado still serves the king loyally. From time to time, he orders peculiar mechanisms and substances from all corners of the world. After receiving them, he spends a few days bragging about some great discovery he's about to make, then ends up gloomy for a few months. Then he receives another package, and the process repeats itself. At night, chilling screams are often heard from his laboratory. Unfortunately, without its founder, Varnhold never really recovered from the blow. Over time, the colony withered away, all the more so when its dwellers continued to disappear under mysterious circumstances. It took less than 2 years for Varnhold to permanently become a ghost town. The only person happy about the news was the king's new advisor, a mysterious and powerful wizard who still serves the ruler loyally to this day. No one knows what happened to the vanished dwellers of Varnhold. It feels like everyone just keeps trying to forget about them. There are still those who blame the king for their disappearance, but they prefer to do so very, very quietly. After the kobolds and mites disappeared, the empty caves beneath the old sycamore quickly became home to all kinds of disgusting critters, giant centipedes being the most innocent and pleasant of them. Attempts have been made to clear out the caves, but it never takes long for something to take up residence again. In the end, the decision was made to block the entrances and burn the giant tree down, destroying the roots that held up the ceiling of the caves. Due to tumult on both sides of the border, Oleg's trading post gradually fell into desolation, regretfully leaving its walls, for which so much blood had been shed. Oleg and Svetlana left the backcountry that was so dear to their hearts and returned to the noise of the big city. Oleg's trading post now resembles a border stronghold more than a haven for merchants and travelers. A town sprung up around it, from which the leader of the guard operates. Oleg and Svetlana aren't too happy about it, but at least they don't have to fear for their lives anymore. Jod and Keston, after surviving the bloom, remained loyal to the king they followed through thick and thin, and they continue to serve as court advisors to this day. The austere priest and the gloomy warrior regularly argue over the proper way to govern the state, as well as which of the two rulers should hear out first. Some things never change. Keston Gares took a post as chief of the kingdom's guard. The former heir to a noble family never returned to Brevoy, severing all ties to his kin. However, a few years after the victory over the First World, a girl arrived from Brevoy and soon married Keston. They say Keston started smiling a lot more after that. Jod remained loyal to the king to the end of his days, healing the sick and generously sharing his austere wisdom with anyone who wished to hear it, and some who didn't. Having fulfilled his duty to the ruler, Erastel's priest peacefully departed this world, surrounded by friends and disciples. The Fae took a fancy to the kingdom, feeling totally at home here. They often play various pranks, but they never do any serious harm. Falcos and Teresia managed to restore the magic forest. Once freed of the anger of the Scythe Tree, people returned to the abandoned village. and it became a haven of friendship between the Fae and ordinary people, just like old times. The lizard folk of the Longtail tribe returned to live on the shores of Candlemere, but they couldn't return to their ancient way of life. Living alongside people, the lizard folk adopted their behaviors, habits, and even religion. More and more of the Longtail tribe pray not to the spirits of their ancestors, but to Erastil or Gorum. They even began to forget their original language. I hope someone writes down their songs and legends before they all sink into oblivion. The Sweet Teeth departed on a journey, hoping to see as many wonders as possible of this world and others. They keep sending us news from every corner of the map. Their bright painted wagon, drawn by a bull mastodon, crisscrosses Golarion, somehow appearing in the center of one incredible story after another. Evindra settled down in the Tuskwater and visits the capital often. She became a friend to the people of the kingdom, helping them and teaching them how to treat the lake life with care. Parents allow their children to swim in the Tuskwater at any time, day or night, secure in the knowledge that she'll look out for them. After the victory, the storyteller abandoned his affairs and began spending a lot of time alone in contemplation. He eventually bid farewell to the king and left his lands. But I suspect the inhabitants of Golarion haven't heard the last of this mysterious traveler, for his own story is hardly finished. Amiri remained a pariah to her native tribe, but she stayed close friends with Nylak, who ruled the Six Bears wisely and taught them to survive in the unfamiliar plains and cities. The restless barbarian would often travel for long stretches of time, but sooner or later she would always return to her old friends, bragging about new scars and recounting new feats, many of which Nylak immortalized in song. Valerie stayed to serve the king, and to this day she continues to be a muse to many people, not just bards and admirers, but to warriors as well. Honest and resilient, Valerie is not just famous for her feats in battle, but also for her patience and kindness, which she says the king helped her discover within herself. Harrim became famous, respected by dwarves throughout our kingdom as well as our neighbors, even as far as the Five Kings Mountains. He's often been asked to help out or teach others, and he's never denied anyone, despite his grumbling. Some people even listen to his preaching. Lucky for us, there's a lot less howling about the end of the world now, and more wise words of moderation and humility. Not all of his disciples turned to Grotus, but everyone took away something useful from his teachings. Jaethal spent some time at the king's court, but it became progressively harder for her to hide her true nature from the omnipresent servants of Pharasma. Realizing the risk, she reluctantly left the kingdom, and she soon sent a message from Geb. In a country populated mainly by undead, Jaethal fit in well, especially with her skills and Urgathoa's blessing. She quickly gained fame and influence there, even gaining the favor of Erasni, the de facto ruler of Geb. Octavia didn't stay still for very long. Soon, she and Reg went to Numeria and started a huge slave rebellion there. They didn't manage to destroy the Technic League, but to this day, slaves speak their names with admiration, and slavers with terror. Over the course of their journey, the two grew as close as ever, leaving their quarrels and resentments behind. After returning from Numeria, Octavia settled in her mother's house and became the king's advisor and loyal companion. Rigangar left for Numeria with Octavia to start a slave rebellion. Over the journey, he really matured and learned to understand others, as well as how to control his anger. After he returned, he took a position in the king's court. Being both formidable and charming, he inspired fear in the hearts of some and lust in others. There are even some rumors that he almost talked Octavia into marrying him, and possibly even continuing the Della Fiorni line. After the war ended, Ekin hung up his bow on the wall and traded the path of the ranger in for the craft of the carpenter. It may not be the most heroic ending to a tragic story like his, but as Torag is my witness, Ekin's happy with it, as is Alina, who became his wife and is bearing his child. Any baby born into this family will be pretty lucky, since the king himself still visits his old friend and will likely become the child's patron. Jubilost returned to the life of a traveling explorer, frequently visiting his favorite kingdom. He said so himself. His famous work studying the First World all opened with a dedication to his longtime companion, the king. Another name was also mentioned, Tuzi, my guide and inspiration. Admirers would ask Jubilost many times about this mystery lady, but he would only chuckle, hitch his knapsack on his shoulder, and return to storm the vast expanses of the First World once again. As for Knock Knock, Hero Knock Knock, he continued his questionably heroic efforts in the Stolen Lands. Despite whatever mess he fell into, no matter the danger he leapt into, he always seemed to scrape through just a little better off than before. Like true heroes, he simply never gave up, struggling on and meeting the challenge of each new day with a spirit that no mishap or misfortune could ever quell. The slightly inaccurate statue of him and the king still stands in the square to this day. The two figures side by side. I've always felt that, while the heights may be a bit off, let's say, it accurately reflects the size and spirit of the goblin hero who'd been nurtured by the teachings of his king. Kalika did not remain in our lands for long. She never lost hope of discovering some news of her sister's fate, and the sorrow in her heart drove her to restless journey. One day she left without saying goodbye. No one knows where, taking only the simple things she fled with from Kadira. Many years after, we received news of the sister's fate. As it turned out, Canera was killed by the Forefather, and her soul, after enduring terrible suffering, was used to create a new she-devil. Somewhere on the roads of Golarion, this terrifying creature crossed paths with Kalika, but no one knows how this meeting ended. Nyrissa and her beloved king live happily together, setting up the kingdom hand in hand. Their union somehow linked the unruliness of the First World with the order of material plane. Nyrissa managed to bring forth the daring vision for which she had once been cursed, the creation of her dream country. Our kingdom is now a flourishing land, taking the best of both wild nature and structured civilization, and our capital is an amazing garden city, which visitors from all over Golarion come to see. As for myself, the author of this book, Lindsay, who never chose a pretty nickname, I'm still here, inside my creation within the Capital Library. I live just like I always dreamed, surrounded by people and books, and not a day goes by without someone turning my pages. My story inspired many others to take up the quill. My readers have written many fierce books, articles, and pamphlets, flinging truth in the faces of tyrants. What more could I dream of? I hope, oh honored reader, that this story offered you some daring ideas, or at least some entertainment. In any case, it's time to set the final period.